Hello and welcome to Punk Rock Academic, the podcast where the rebellious spirit of punk rock meets the halls of higher education. We dive into the stories of those who break the mold, challenge the status quo, and bring the DIY ethos to academia. I'm Alex Yore, and with me as always is Dallas McCulloch, your guide through the intersection of anarchy and academics. Get ready to meet the professors, scholars, and students who are as hardcore about their studies as they are about their music. Let's turn up the volume and tear down the walls of convention. This is Punk Rock Academic. Hello and welcome to the inaugural episode of Punk Rock Academic. I'm really excited about this episode. Today we have with us Steve Lamos, PhD, Associate Professor of Writing and Rhetoric in the English Department at University of Colorado, Boulder. He's the author of the book Interests and Opportunities, Race, Racism, and University Writing Instruction in the Post-Civil Rights Era, which won a special commendation from the Conference on College Composition and Communication Outstanding Book Award Committee. He is perhaps best known for his role as drummer of the indie emo band American Football, where his fluid and organic drumming is the perfect backbone to the intimate melodic blend of indie, emo, math rock, and jazz. American Football actually started playing in the late 90s in Champaign, Illinois. They played a few shows, recorded an EP and an album with Polyvinyl Records, then disbanded. About 15 years later, in 2014, Polyvinyl re-released their eponymous debut album, which launched the band to a well-deserved spot among the greats in the scene, where they continue to perform for sold-out crowds around the world. Dr. Lamos' upcoming book, Resonant Rhythms, will explore intersections between his work in academia and his life as an indie musician. Couldn't really ask for a better first guest, wouldn't you say? Let's get into it.
So Steve, Lamos,
yes, please.
Lamos, PhD, right?
Yes, sir.
That's a PhD in English from University of Illinois?
Yeah, I did an English degree, and my specialty is really rhetoric and composition.
So you will be criticizing everything that we misspeak.
What else is the degree for, really, other than to just become a teacher? No.
Alternatively, you're also what are you fairly well known for? Let's say if I'm reading Rolling Stone, like what?
I don't know about any of that, but I've played like you both. I've played drums for 1,000 years, and I play in a band called American Football, which was a band in the late 90s, and then became an actual band in 2014 or so, with the help of the internet and young people from around the world. So it's been very kind of interesting and exciting.
So what was your introduction to music, just in general?
Oh wow, my dad was an accordion player in Chicago, as you can imagine, the kind of excitement that would engender. And he started bringing me. I probably started playing violin at 4 or 5 years old, and trumpet around 7 or 8. And he would bring me to play with him sometimes. And so there was music in the house all the time. My mom sang to us as kids. So music is part of our DNA. My brother's a drum and bass DJ these days. My kids play. So music has been as much a part of my life as anything else. So I'm glad to still be doing it.
I guess within that, what was kind of your introduction to, this is punk rock academic. It's a pretty wide net within, punk rock. Obviously, it's more the ethos. So let's say within punk or indie or hardcore or metal, what was kind of your introduction from, what sort of stuff was your dad playing, I guess? And then what was your introduction to that scene?
My dad used to make a joke that rock musician is an oxymoron. So he hated this music. That was he hated it so much. So we heard classical and jazz as a kid. I was studying jazz trumpet in high school and a little bit at DePaul in college. And just one day I couldn't take it anymore. I wasn't good enough to really progress, and I didn't like the vibe of it. And then my brother was into the Chicago and kind of Midwest indie scene. And he kept telling me to go see this band called Cat and Jazz. And I had a chance to go see them in Danville at a VFW. And I remember that show like it was yesterday. It was so...
$3?
Oh my God. Oh yeah. No, they were the best band on the planet, and probably still to this, it was such a magic experience. And those kinds of moments were really formative for me. And so the whole indie thing, and I guess the what has since been known as the emo thing, although maybe we didn't use that word in the same way back then. That was so important. And it was so that was my punk thing. And then they helped me understand Fugazi. And all those people in that world kind of oriented us toward DC and that whole culture. As it turns out, I think Matt and Darcy from Polyvinyl Records actually put that Cat and Jazz VFW show on in Danville. They were sort of the Danville people. And so here we are all these years later still talking about, things at VFW halls from 1995 or whenever it would have been.
Yeah, I mean, it's same. We were Midwest boys. The same thing. We would go see, whatever punk band at the hall up the street from, it's somebody's parents sign off for $100. It's go see Crack Baby with the Schmefkins, whatever, just like crappy, But
Yeah.
but when you were doing it, it was Cap and Jazz, who have since become legends of sorts.
Yeah, and that whole world was Braid, and there are a lot of bands that kind of migrated down to Champaign a little bit later. So Champaign, there's Chicago. I grew up in the suburbs, but went to school in Champaign, and a number of us kind of reconvened down there and started doing different things down there.
And now, notably, I guess seeing Cap and Jazz kind of your introduction. So the drummer, with yourself being a drummer, is Mr. Mike Kinsella from American Football. So I guess kind of what was the transition there? Like how did you sneak in and steal the spot from the guy in the band that you were kind of looking up to, who was a kid at that time too, right?
He was, they were quite a bit younger. Mike and Steve came down to Champaign a couple of years after I saw him for the first time. So I'm 4 or 5 years older than those guys. So I had just started graduate school, and I think they came down as freshmen. I was playing in this other band, and I actually remember we opened for a band called Boys Life. Do you remember that band? I think they're from Kansas City. Kind of like a Midwest emo-y sort of band. And Mike came up to this thing that I was playing in afterwards and was like, oh, that was cool. I want to sing for you guys. And we were like, really? Oh, okay. And so he started singing with this other group. That stopped happening. And I started playing with Mike's roommate, Steve Holmes. Mm-hmm. He knew my younger brother. Both of them kind of did, but Steve in particular. We started playing, and then Mike joined us, and that became what was American football. And that was probably the end of 96 when that happened, something like that, maybe very early 97.
So in this time, like how old were you when you started going to these shows?
I was older than the kids. I was probably 20, and I would imagine the other kids were all 15, 16. So I was definitely like kind of the weird older guy, but they were my roommate, this guy named Paul Preisner, would come with me and some other folks. And so we felt a little less weird. I'd sort of make him come along as the older person. But Braid and those bands were all playing at that time. Bob and Chris, I knew a little bit. And then, Champaign had bands like Hum and Poster Children. Later on, bands like Sarge. And Champaign was such a great place to be at that time. Yeah. And the music scene was so vibrant and exciting. It was great.
So I don't know anything about drums. Alex, ask about time signature sort of stuff. I don't know anything about any of this, dude.
Well, I mean, one of my first questions, like listening to you guys, is like, where do you start when you're coming up with a drum part? What's your process like for that?
I would say back in the day, Mike and Steve were roommates, and they would do these things in their house, and I didn't really have access to that. I think they would sit in front of the TV for 8 hours a day and like work on these songs. Mm-hmm. But they would come to me. They would bring these songs over to this little house I was renting, and it was the most natural thing in the world. Like I don't remember counting things or any of that. It was just like, obviously, if you're going to do that weird stuff, this has to happen. And I was new to the drums at that time, and I actually think there was a certain innocence to it because I didn't know what a normal beat should sound like, and so was probably more like a percussionist or something. I would say these days I practice still a fair amount, and I have a different kind of process. But I try to do noodling a few times a week, just to sort of shooting for certain vibes or ideas. I just read the Dillatime book, and this is beautiful book about time stretching and sort of orientation to time, and like, yeah, there you are. Well, trying to like deliberately play around with ahead and behind the beat and that sort of stuff. So there's a little bit more, I guess. I'm talking to two academics. This kind of thinking seeps into your head and it ruins it in certain ways, but in other ways it's useful.
You can never go back after, yeah.
You can't. I'm actually reading books for pleasure. It's been, 3 decades since I've read books for pleasure. Like this is, I think that as a middle-aged person trying to be a little more deliberate, like this is a real gift to be able to do any of this. I would say as a kid, it was really easy. It's become more difficult as an adult, but in a useful kind of way. I guess that's life in a certain sense.
So I guess since you were a little bit older when you started hanging out with the VFW DIY punk rock scene, but like, were you a good student, or did you? Because there was definitely that mentality of like, when you're 13, it's like punk rock, anarchy, fuck my parents, like I'm gonna fail out sort of thing. But like, did you get to miss that, or?
I was such a little brown noser kid. No, I was an excellent student. It didn't mean I had to learn, and I learned a lot later in life what failure was. Like I was real good at doing the things that you had to do well on tests and things. That's obviously not the same as knowledge, and it's certainly not the same as wisdom. And so my younger brother was much more the kind of punk rock up yours. Our parents were pretty strict, and I was the sort of like goody two shoes one, and he was like the kind of rough and tumble one. But I envied him and still do in a certain way because he doesn't care. He does what he wants. And so this world was in some ways our way of kind of like meeting in the middle. But no, I was one of those academics who honestly, I went to grad school because I wanted to keep playing drums, but I also, school was what I was good at. I wasn't necessarily good at other things. And that's a problem, because the problem as you get older, like, oh gosh, and you have to justify what is it that you do and why do you do it? And then you have to enter the real world sometimes. And so I think now I love teaching. I love being here. I love also being able to do music and kind of jump back and forth a little bit. And I feel real good about it. But for a long time, I was the good student who didn't understand how life worked in certain ways. Maybe I understand a little better now anyway.
So when American football had started, you were already in grad school at this point, and the other guys were undergrads?
Yeah, which is weird, right? You shouldn't do that in grad school. And that's a big age gap too around that time. But it kind of worked out. Champaign was easy. It was cheap. We all lived really close proximity. It was possible to do grad study and still, play in the band 3 times a week. That's all. I didn't have kids. I was dating the woman who's now my wife, but we weren't. We didn't have a family or any of that stuff. And it was like, what the hell not? You're in a college town. What else should you be doing?
Yeah, we did the same thing in Kalamazoo. Just our band wasn't American football, but it's okay.
Well, neither was American football. Nobody cared about American football. American football is now some weird revisionist history that restarted in 2014. No one could give a 3 shits about American football in the 90s, and it was fine. And so now by internet circulation and all these interesting things that people study, it's become a thing, and it's great. I would say it feels like a real band now, but no, it was like an art project or something, or like a student project in the 90s, and we didn't know anything.
How many shows do you guys think you played, like in the Champaign-Urbana days?
I don't think it's 15 even. Steve Holmes swears that there were more, and then once in a while somebody will find one. I'm like, evidently we did play the Fireside Bowl in 99. I don't remember. Not many. We actually played, do you know Grand Haven, Michigan?
Mm-hmm.
I'm well aware of Grand Haven, yeah.
I think we played there 3 times. I think we played Grand Haven, Michigan more than anywhere except the party house in Champaign. Why? I don't know. They kept having us back. But it was very
nice beaches.
Yeah, and it was like some little, it was like a coffee shop or something. It was not a thing. It was crazy that Polyvinyl put the record out. It's crazy what happened to the record. Evidently, there are other bands that the internet has resuscitated in the same kind of way, but I think ours, we caught a wave at a particular time, and here I'm grateful for it because it feels a lot more like a thing now that we work at and try to make seem presentable. But back in the day, it was something else.
You're all U of Illinois guys, right?
Yes.
So then it was basically what the other guys graduated and the band kind of dispersed, and then you did PhD?
Exactly. Yeah. I stayed down there. They graduated and went home. I think in 99, I had maybe just gone ABD or something. And I got a job running, if you guys are familiar with writing centers on campus, so I was doing that full time and kind of taking my sweet time writing a dissertation. I was in PhD program from 97 until 2005. And as you well know, that's not how you're supposed to do it. So it took a long time, but because I was doing a lot of admin work and basically like full-time staff, it ended up working out. My wife and I, it was gainful employment. I could slow down on the PhD thing. And then I was lucky when I got done in 2004, there were a lot of tenure track jobs in rhetoric and composition. It's not really true anymore. I think that market has sort of bottomed out in a number of ways, but there were jobs all over the place in 2004 and 2005. And so after I got finished, I was at Illinois State for a year, and then I came out here to Boulder in 2005, and I've been here ever since. But yeah, it was very much like they're going on to do their lives. Steve is vice president of something called ADP, which is like a payroll company, like the payroll company, I think. Something crazy. Yeah, he's like a watermark. You need to watch him on the phone. Like, he's like the corporate sledgehammer. And then Mike does music in a bunch of different bands. That's kind of his full-time gig. And then Nate, who joined the band in 2014, also makes his money doing music. So there's two like real musicians and the two of us who get to do it for fun. And it's amazing that we do it as often as we do, given the weirdness of making this all work in middle age. But so far, so good.
Previously, were you working summer semester? So you're at UC Boulder now. Your tenure there?
Yeah. I got tenure right before this happened, which was
Perfect.
Couldn't have been better because I think I would have been more nervous about it pre-tenure, but I think it's played out so that this is summers, breaks, and weekends. I still have yet to miss a class to do this. So it's been nice that way, but it's also it's fairly unusual that we can probably do between 20 and 40 dates a year. In a good, I would say a good year is 20, a crazy year is 40. But like a real band, they do that in a month, right? So we get to do this, but very much on a part-time schedule. I think it keeps it fresh, and it's a nice complement to the other things each of us has going on. We all have young kids too, so that's a thing for us as well.
And it makes it so you don't have to play like Des Moines on a Tuesday. Like it's how many times you played with the other bands and their girlfriends. It was basically 20. You guys were just kind of getting offers, and Polyvinyl was like, yeah, they're not a band. They're getting offers, and now they're not a band, and then getting finally as an offer, like, holy shit, dude! Like we should absolutely do some, crazy things that we were not able to do when we were kids.
Essentially, yes. Steve had found some demo tapes in like 2013 or something in a closet somewhere. I think he sent those to Polyvinyl. The record. Steve and I were pretty checked out. I think Mike had some sense that people were buying the record, but not really. And that was the time. Polyvinyl, one of the most ethical. Matt and Darcy are some of the most ethical people I've ever met. Because I would get these kind of small checks every 6 months, and I'm like, they didn't have to give these to me. They could have absolutely. I wouldn't have known the difference, Yeah. But in 2014, they wanted to reissue the LP, the first one. Then it became clear to us that LimeWire and CD burning and Napster and stuff, people knew kind of what this was. They made us an offer we couldn't refuse to play a couple times. And, those Webster Hall shows, for instance, blew out in seconds and off we went. And we very much had to learn how to be a band. I remember Mike saying, we're not doing this unless my cousin Nate's playing because we need bass and we need somebody to keep this, sort of keep this in a direction. And, God bless him for insisting on that. And Nate is like the engine that drives this whole thing. And, we have a guy named Mike Arzone, who's been our guitar tech since day one, but also plays in the band at this point. Essentially, another guy, vibes player named Corey Bracken, who's a member of the band at this point, and it's become like a whole entourage. It's kind of a blast. We're gonna head off end of the month to play our first set of these 25th anniversary reunion things over in Italy and Spain, and pretty excited. It's gonna be a good time.
Have you guys done Italy or Spain?
We've done both. Yeah, we're going to hit, this will be our second time through Milan, and we're doing the Primavera in Barcelona, and then a new one in Porto and some other club shows. They were a blast last time we went. So I'm pretty excited. My wife's coming with me for the first time too. I don't think she's really ever seen this thing in its full, for better or for worse, its full form. So I'll be curious to see what she thinks.
See her watch you play for 5,000 people screaming in a foreign language.
I don't know. Yeah, and also hopefully we'll get to go to the art museum or something. But it's a good time. She teaches high school, and so I can imagine the grind that can be. I think she really likes her job, but it's exhausting. So I'm also looking forward. We haven't had a vacation without our kids in a long time, so it should be a good time.
That's the smart way to do it. Yeah, you could show up early or hang out late, sort of thing. So you can. See, we're kind of at the stage where, if you're not doing the 200-day-a-year grind thing, it's like this is a glorified way to get a paid vacation. Saying Dad's going on a bender with his buddies doesn't sound great. Dad's got to go play shows in England, at a festival sponsored by Stella Artois.
That is definitely part of the fun of this. I think it is definitely toes the line between playing and having fun with college buddies. And I think, I think were we to do it more, we'd have to orient to it differently, and it might take some of the fun out of it. I think this as a complement to other parts of life is, I'm grateful for it, and it's pretty rarefied to be able to do this way and see it work. I mean, we've been a full decade of this at this point, which is crazy to think that we've been able to thread that needle pretty consistently for those 10 years. But I hope we can do it some more,
All right. Like, how do you feel, guys, growing up in that? I know you guys were playing with did you play with like Hey Mercedes and stuff, or you're playing with
We were definitely in that yeah, that sort of group of folks. I played for a short time with Chris Broach and Firebird. That ran kind of parallel to the Hey Mercedes
Yeah.
band, but that was a little bit later. I would imagine that was probably early 2000s or something. But same world.
Just like hanging out in that kind of DIY, that real DIY punk rock sort of ethos. Like, how has that, I guess, influenced you in academia, or you as a professor, especially? Because you find, and yeah, we'll start with that, and then we'll carry on from there.
That's such a great question. I would say so. I'm working for the last 4 or 5 years, and it's slow going, but it seems worth it. I'm working on a book on rhythm and resonance. Right? What are the rhythmic activities associated with composing things? Those could be composing, writing, the thing I do for my regular job, teaching writing, or writing drum parts or whatever. Those are rhythmic activities that involve the doing of things in a consistent kind of way over time. As DIY for me in a nutshell. You throw your stuff in a van, you play the thing. You play Des Moines on a Tuesday night. You try not, you try to limit your substance intake so that somebody can get you to the next spot the next day. You do the same thing. Off you go, and there's a kind of rhythm to that life. Somebody I know just saw Mike Watt. He's probably still got the same fucking van he's had for the last 40 years. He does the thing. He's like a lifer who does that. And I think that's just there's a way in which that kind of sense of self, and he's obviously figured out a way to like limit his substance intake or whatever it is, like he's a grown up who does this and clearly loves it. And it's clearly a part of who he is. I look toward those people. I try to think about when I teach, how can I, talk to 19, 20, 21-year-olds with an idea that you will become this, bald 50-year-old, whatever your version of that is at some point. You're paying a bunch of money to be in school. Like, the best we can hope to do is to help you get some sense of the rhythms of your life, direct those in a particular kind of hopefully healthy way where you can do the things that you want to do over a sustained period of time. And if you're lucky, those things start to resonate with other rhythms of other parts of your life, and you become a whole and sort of healthy person. So I think this is interesting. I think this gift of music coming back to me has helped me through a lot of things. And I guess I would hope to pass some of that along, pay it forward, as they say, to young kids. And so the DIY thing was really, really valuable, I think, as a rhythmic activity. A kind of ethos, a kind of don't screw your neighbor over kind of thing, on the best night anyway. And I think those are important things for us to be thinking about as academics. Although I should probably not swear so much in
you
podcasts about academics, but oh well, that's over now.
This is punk rock academic. It's
right.
You have the sleeveless comeback kid shirt on. Like, it's. You got anything, Alex?
Well, I guess I'm just wondering, how much does your band come up sort of when you're teaching a class? I mean, whether that's you sort of bringing in anecdotes from being in the band, or do people ask you, do you have students ask you about it, or?
Until 2 or 3 years ago, it didn't come up much at all. Pre 2014, I think I had 2 conversations, in 10 years about it. Kids who knew it through some way. But in the last couple of years, because I teach a writing on music class these days, I do talk about it. I do a day on what it means I talk about this rhythm and resonance framework I was just talking about. Hey, if you were to think about, what it might mean to have something that you enjoyed doing when you were younger come back to you in some sort of meaningful way, what would it look like? That sort of stuff. And so I do talk about it. I think our campus, Boulder, isn't really this kind of music is not front and center. And so I think sometimes students know it. Other times students seem mildly amused at the idea that the person who's been boring them for the semester to that point now has this other thing to do. But I also think, again, I think people who love music, there's something healthy about doing the thing you like to do, but also, doing something else. So when it comes up, I'm flattered and I'm grateful. If it doesn't come up, or if people are bored, I've given talks to big groups in the music school and watched people fall asleep and stuff. I'm like, yeah, no matter what, this is still school. And sometimes that just means, people check out. So it's interesting. And sometimes it's even a little humbling too, but I'm glad for it. And then sometimes when the grind of school gets to be too much, I think I get to go to Primavera in a couple weeks. So no matter how bored you appear to me to be, in 2 weeks' time, I'll be on the beach and playing some music, and it'll be great.
People will be stoked to see you. Yeah.
That's right. Other 18-year-olds pay lots of money. seem to want something out of this. No, I've had some of the best classes I've ever had in the last 2 years. This writing on music thing really seems to attract a certain kind of person who wants to not necessarily trained musician types, but they really want to talk about why this music is meaningful to them. And these some of the deepest and like most profound stuff I've ever gotten. I've been doing this 30 years. I taught my first class in 95. First composition class in 95, and I can say 29 years later, like this is that part of academic life has been the gift that's keeps on giving, and music and the writing thing are now kind of intertwined in this interesting way.
Is this a course that you developed, or was that already part of?
It was on the books, but this is a new spin. I guess it's sort of rooted in musical phenomenology, which I didn't know anything about before I started reading for this stuff, but the notion that the body completes a circuit of meaning or even completes some sort of ontological circuit, brings things into the world. There's some rhetorical pieces too. The way we feel, the way we're made to feel is persuasive in subtle, certain kinds of ways. And I have a couple of readings that are fairly, they're academic, but they're also reader friendly, I guess. Throw a couple things at students and then ask them to write about their musical history as an embodied felt thing. And actually have them narrate the experience of a song using a particular protocol that I stole from a Rhet colleague of mine. Their final projects are like research papers explaining how their embodied musical experience relates to their future profession or discipline or major. Stuff is fascinating what these kids come up with. And they've also brought some things to the table that have helped me to teach the class better. So I feel like they're very much teaching me how to teach this class better moving forward. It's been a blast, a total blast.
Is it a lot of non-musicians taking the class?
Almost exclusively. So once in a blue moon, someone from the music school will come in, and my theory knowledge sort of atrophied at junior year of high school. I can read music and not much better. So the musicians come in, and I've had multiple people say to me, I've never been asked to write about music like this. Right. And some hate it, but most folks are, if they're musicians, they're kind of pop, self-trained people or non-musicians entirely. This vocabulary, though, is maybe especially accessible to them because they know they love this, but this vocabulary becomes a way for them to talk about quite literally, when I listen to my headphones, the sound's traveling over my left eye. Oh, it feels like it's going through my sinus. Oh, I have a weird flutter in my neck bone and like that kind of stuff. I get interesting papers from kids in neurobiology, physiology, like the whole sort of embodied basis for how sonic vibration becomes neuronal, activity, this sort of thing. It's cool. Yeah, I really, this has been a real gift to kind of run into this at mid-career,
I feel like that class, especially, like you couldn't just get, I guess, any geek off the street. It's a very small set of people that have these sort of experiences where it's like, what the fuck you're talking about. You're a PhD, but also like it's something like, have you had other kids, let's say, in this class write on like any music? Anybody ever like try to say, I did Repeater by Fugazi, like just because the automatic A sort of thing, or like is it a pretty wide range of music people are picking?
It is a wide range. And it is interesting. I had one of my favorite students this past semester knew all about sort of third, fourth, fifth wave emo. I didn't know a single band he referenced. And he's like, I just told him, I'm like, I feel bad. I don't know what I don't know the content of what you're talking about, but happily he had some really interesting arguments to make. Have you guys read Jessica Hopper? That essay, Emo Where the Boys Aren't? It's about sexism in emo culture. I've taught several essays from her. She's an editor now at a U of Texas series that's sort of on the edge of academic and pop. Like Abdurraqib's book on Tribe Called Quest is in that series. I just got a book the other day from a guy named Bruce Adams on the origin of cranky records in that series. He wrote a really smart argument about sexism in emo where I could follow the argument even though I didn't know the bands he was talking about. So there are times and places where I feel stupid because I'm not 20 and I don't know what the thing is. But on the other hand, some of my favorite papers are about bands I don't like or genres that I can't stand. And that's kind of interesting too. But when, once in a while, like other students gave me, I really like Danny Brown. I probably shouldn't admit that on this podcast.
Yes, you should.
They got me into Danny Brown. And I'm like,
baby.
I can't play it at home. I can't play it in class. I fucking love it. I love it so much. And that at that moment, I'm just like, oh my God, I love that I have these students who would take the time to say, hey, here's an artist you need to hear. And then that kind of revitalizes my listening. And I love that Danny Brown's kind of an older guy and coming at this from a different angle too, you know?
And he's just, I mean, he's so goofy. Like in a world of just like trying to be the baddest dude ever, it's like, who are the Eminem and Danny Brown come on Detroit being like, here's me seeing about how fucked up my life is and how much of a loser I am. Like and I love it, you know?
There must be, and I guess I hadn't really thought of it in that way, but that is that kind of Midwest ethos, right? Like that sort of, aw shucks-ish kind of thing, being really open and honest kind of thing.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm glad you said that way. It helps me understand I've been reading a lot about Midwest music scenes lately, but I hadn't thought about the Detroit rap scene as a version of that kind of Midwest music scene, but coming from a different place with different sets of issues and different folks chasing after different things. But there's a certain aw shucksness that we all share that I think the coasts come at in a different way, maybe.
Absolutely. And I think just also, I mean, it's hard to be pretentious if you're from the Rust Belt, like it seems like it's a trickier operation. We don't have that infrastructure, it's not like, so we did place, like we lived in a $800 Alex with $800 a month in a 5-bedroom house.
Yeah. Dolphin house.
Band practice in the basement sort of thing. And like, we had like some like pretty legendary, like some bands that, do quite well play that, but that was just like, that's what the scene was. And I'm sure Champaign Urbana was the same thing where it's like, like your fucking logo for your band is a house where that you played that house recently, it's not the Roxy. It's not the fucking Hollywood a go-go, dude.
I was just talking to on Instagram to a friend of mine, Rachel, who played in a band called Very Secretary. She was the presider of I think it was 808 California house. And the number, I saw Cat and Jazz there a bunch of times, but I remember Lungfish came through, and I don't have to explain Lungfish to you guys. I always have to explain to the 20-year-olds. But there were so many people that lead singer and guitarists were in the living room and bass and drums were in the kitchen. And so it became this kind of like Flaming Lips Zyrika thing where the band had to play through the crowd because it was just so crowded. And like those shows meant the world to me. Right. I'd love to just to be able to participate in that again. As a grown-up, all the liability and risks
Right.
that every one of those shows invites. And like I could never, I can't even look at them anymore. But like at the time, it was so.
Yeah, when you're 19 and full of malt liquor.
Oh my God! There's just the number of violations of everything. It's amazing that more people don't. They didn't like implode or something. But what a reason to go to school in the Midwest. I just remember seeing there's a band called C-Clamp that was really influential on us. We would see them at house parties. I remember going to see Hum at the Blind Pig down the street, and that they were to this day the best fucking live band I've ever seen. Just so overwhelming, and the Blind Pig maybe held 200 people. It's like you go see them once a month on a Thursday, and that was our thing. Chicago had its Empty Bottle and those bands, but I felt very directly tied to the house party scene and the Champaign Urbana bands in particular. It's so important.
We could say the exact same thing, but with us, it's called Kalamazoo and Detroit, where you call it Champaign Urbana and Chicago. It's the exact same shit.
Uh-huh.
Now, do you find yourself meeting other academics that come from the same scene? Because it seems like I just finished at Yale, where you would not think like this is the place, but like my internship advisor grew up with like the Converge guys and like that whole like Chicago hardcore scene. The head of my department, like it's just to fuck with him one time. I said, "What's Steve Albini like in real life?" And he actually did know Steve. I'm like, "Of course you did." Rest in peace. And like I've got another professor who I hung out with at an English beat show. So it's like, so do you find yourself with these other? Because it seems like that's the circle where it's the professors. It's obviously very skewed left wing. It's skewed, kind of weirdos that are punks that know how to read. So do you find yourself in those circles frequently?
To some degree. I was actually really flattered when you guys reached out because I thought this feels like a kind of thing that's out there in the world. I just don't know as much about it. I should say, you asked me the question earlier about DIY and influencing academics. Obviously, I think the politics of DIY and the associated kind of progressive politics that can go along with that. I remember being challenged so many different times by people in these scenes about class privilege, about white privilege, about who I am as a person, and pushing back, and sometimes being a real prick in response to this because I didn't like being challenged. I was at that age where I thought I knew every damn thing. But I think that the DIY politics then they lend themselves to a kind of academic worldview, because I think we are supposed to be folks who read and think. I don't want to pat ourselves too much on the back. We have plenty of PR work to do. Clearly we do. If we did a better job of explaining what we did, I think we'd have fewer people, wanting to knock it all down. All that said, I was just chatting with a faculty earlier this morning, who is involved, has a foot in this world and a foot in, music performance. We're talking about doing a panel with some other old friends. A friend of mine who I went to grad school with was A&R at Sony Records when we were young. And so there are definitely these people sort of out in the world, but I appreciate actually that you guys are starting to do this, because I imagine there's a whole subset of folks who are dying to talk about exactly the kinds of things that you're raising here.
When we're done recording, we'll give you the names of who we got lined up, and you're going to be like, "Holy shit, that's crazy!" But
and I got some folks you guys may want to talk to too. But yeah, I think that'd be fantastic.
That's great. Alex, you got anything crucial here? Should we go towards our closer questions?
Yeah, let's start wrapping them up.
All right. So these are just like some generic, basic questions, but let's start with Desert Island album. Maybe even like a few if you've got, but.
Well, I've been listening to the Miles Davis In a Silent Way record probably almost daily for 35 years. So I would have to bring it just because that's like my security blanket. Mm-hmm. But yeah, there's a bunch of. I could just bring the one, yeah.
Let's go 5. You get 5, maybe.
Oh shit! Now that's much more complicated. Oh man, I wish. Oh, I should have. Yeah, you'd think of all the questions to be able to answer easily, this would be the one. There's so much. I think I would bring. I have this little MP3 player that I dumped a bunch of like random crap to about 10 years ago. I would just bring that. It's probably got 2 hours worth of stuff, and it's just a sampling of different things. So it's some little thing I bought at Walmart 15 years ago. It's still got some MP3 files on it. So I'm just going to bring that. I'll weasel out of this question.
And Bitches Brew is on it.
Yeah. That's one of those. That's one of those records. I'm a big fan of Bill Frisell. If you know his work at all, a kind of jazz guitar player. I would definitely Smashing Pumpkins. That Siamese Dream record is a pretty important record to me. I'm a Gillian Welch person. I would try to bring that whole collection somehow if I could weasel my way into that. Those are some of the things off the top of my head.
What is some extremely underrated, underappreciated band that like people need to like dive into, either current or past? But
I don't know if they're under. I told one of my students about Rodin recently, which was kind of the like post Slint, that kind of Kentucky stuff. It's one of the best records I've. Tara Jane O'Neill plays bass for them, and it's one of the guys was in Slint, I think too. It's such a great record. Oh my god! So that's one that I would. Do you guys know that album? Mm-mm. Okay, that's your homework. Yeah, that's such a good record. Yeah, there you go.
Well, what's the last album you listened to?
Oh my god, I've been listening to a bunch of Danny Brown. That Atrocity Exhibition record is great. The JPEG Mafia collab he did, I can't get enough of that record. Again, I shouldn't be saying these things because it's sometimes I'm putting it on. I'm thinking, I can't say these lyrics out loud. I shouldn't be, but it's great. It's so much fun.
And you're not saying that just because we're from Michigan.
No. I'm so happy to like. This shit just makes me happy. But I listen to the same kinds of things regularly. There's a bunch of Bill Frisell kind of on repeat. The Gillian Welch I was talking about earlier is on repeat for me pretty consistently. So I have things that I listen to for like daily sustenance, and then once in a while kind of push out a little bit. But those are the first 4 that come to mind for me recently.
Cool. I guess any closing notes or anything important you want to say to people that are kind of interested in this intersection of punk rock and academia?
I just think I'm glad that you guys are starting to do this. I look forward to you talking to lots of different kinds of folks, because I do think that this world takes all comers. And I do think that there is, as you were saying, Dallas, like there's a kind of mindset if you buy into the kind of DIY punk rock ethos, take seriously the idea that it's a beautiful world and also a world that has issues and problems and the kind of thing that you can think through and try to make better. It should appeal to academic types and vice versa. I imagine academic mindsets could bring something interesting. I think about some of the books that I've been reading recently, and the ones that are they're honest about kind of what's day-to-day things going on in the scene, but also asking bigger questions like, why does this matter? Who cares? How does this impact the world? I think academics we have something to offer. We bring something to the table that makes life richer. And so I look forward to watching you guys talk to as many people as you can and seeing what they think. I do think that this is a rich place to think, and probably a rich place to do academic work, frankly, too. But also it's nice to be middle-aged and be able to bash away at the drums. And I hope there are other middle-aged bashers out there as well that you might be lining up. So we'll see.
Hell yeah. Sounds good, brother. Well, thank you.
Appreciate it, guys. Thank you.
And that's a wrap for this episode of Punk Rock Academic. We hope you're as inspired as we are by the incredible stories from the punk rockers revolutionizing higher education. If you enjoyed today's show, please be sure to subscribe, leave a review, and share it with your fellow rebels. Stay tuned for more tales of academic anarchy and keep the DIY spirit alive. Until next time, keep rocking and never stop learning.